Good afternoon, ma'am. Good afternoon, classmates. We are Group 7 and this is our topic, Organizational Design, Structure, Culture, and Control. Sapos, designed to deliver happiness. Sapos is a shoe in a clothing store. Sapos' mission is to deliver happiness, to make its customer, employee, and stakeholders happy. They put several policies and procedures in place. A short history background of Sapos. Sapos.com is an American online shoe and clothing retailer based in Las Vegas, Nevada, United States. The company was founded in 1999 by Nick Swinmurn and launched under the domain name shoesite.com. In July 2009, Amazon acquired Sapos in all-stock deal worth around $1.2 billion at the time. Sapos 10 core values. Number 1. Deliver wow through service. 2. Embrace and drive change. 3. Create fun and a little weirdness. 4. Be adventurous, creative, and open-minded. 5. Pursue growth and learning. 6. Build open and honest relationship with communication. 7. Build a positive team and family spirit. 8. Do more with less. 9. Be passionate and determined. 10. Be humble. Strategy implementation concerns the organization, coordination, and integration of how work gets done. It is key to gaining and sustaining competitive advantage. Formulation and implementation. Strategy implementation is the process by which an organization translates its chosen strategy into action plans and activities. How to organize for competitive advantage. The process of creating, implementing, monitoring, and modifying the structure, processes, and procedures of an organization. It's about creating, implementing, monitoring, and modifying the structures, processes, and procedures of an organization. We can say that organizing competitive advantage is needed in an organization. Each procedure and structure must needed in the company, such as creating innovative ideas that lead better for organization, implementing rules and regulations that also lead for a better relationship individually, both to leaders and followers, monitoring and modifying time to time if there's something changes and development of the company, and also to monitor the performance of the company and the employees inside and out. The goal is to design an organization that allows managers to effectively translate their chosen strategy into a realized one. It is important to implement the strategy that discussed by the members and leaders of an organization. And when everyone's decision is fully complete and everyone agrees, it can be implemented in the organization as a solid strategy that can be used. Organizational inertia and the failure of established firms. Inertia, a firm's resistance to change the status quo, can set the stage for the firm's subsequent failure. Successful firms often plant the seed of subsequent failure. They optimize their organizational structure to the current situation. Organizational inertia can lead to the failure of established firms when a tightly coupled system of strategy and structure experiences internal or external shifts. It's about a complex relationship between the interpreted performance and strategic actions negotiated in formal decision making and planning. Example, if a firm's strategy often follows its structure, if the managers only consider the reversal, the system is prone to break apart when external and internal shifts put pressure on the system. The key elements of organizational structure. That structure determines how the work efforts of individuals and teams are orchestrated and how resources are distributed. The blue arrows show the firm's tightly coupled organizational design. The light gray arrows indicate pressures emanating from internal shifts such as accelerated growth, a change in the business model, entry into new markets, a change in the top management team, or mergers and acquisitions. The dark gray arrows indicate external pressures which can stem from any of the festal force. Specialization describes the degree to which a task is divided into separate jobs, that is, the division of labor. Requires a trade-off between breadth and depth of knowledge. Specialization, it is the process of concentrating on and becoming expert in a particular subject or skill. And that's all, ma'am. Thank you.
I'm Jesselyn C. Marquez and I will discuss how to organize for competitive. Organizational structure refers to how individual and teamwork within an organization are coordinated to achieve organizational goals and objectives. Individual work needs to be coordinated and managed. Structure is a valuable tool in achieving coordination, as it specifies reporting relationship, determines formal communication channels, and describes how separate actions of individuals are linked together. Organization can function within a number of different structures, each possessing distinct advantages and disadvantages. Formalization. What is formalization? Formalization, an element of organizational structures that capture the extent to which employee behavior is steered by explicit and codified rules and procedures. Formalization is the degree which jobs within the organization are standardized, and the extent to which employee behavior is guided by rules and procedures. Capture the extent to which employee behavior is steered by explicit and codified rules and procedures. Formalized structure are characterized by detailed written rules and policies of what to do in a specific situation. These are often codified in employees' handbooks. Formalized structure are those in which there are many rules and regulations. These structures control employee behavior using written rules, so that employees have a little autonomy to decide on a case-by-case basis. An advantage of formalization is that it makes employee behavior more predictable. Whenever a problem at work arises, employees knows to turn to a handbook or a procedure guideline. Therefore, employees respond to problem in a similar way across the organization. This leads to consistency of behavior. McDonald's is the best example of formalization. For example, uses detailed standard operating procedure throughout the world to ensure consistent quality and service. Don Thompson, McDonald Corporation President and CEO, formalized the company's strategy by focusing on three key priorities in the company's plan to win: optimize the menu, modernize the customer experience, and broaden restaurant accessibility. Formalization. Therefore, it is not necessarily negative. Often, it is necessarily to achieve consistent and predictable result. Airlines, for example, must rely on a high degree of formalization to instruct pilots on how to fly their airplanes in order to ensure safety and reliability. Yet, a high degree of formalization can slow decision making, reduce creativity and innovation, and hinder customer service. Formalization reduces ambiguity and provides direction to employees. It is not without disadvantages. A high degree of formalization may actually lead to reduced innovativeness because employees are used to behaving in a certain manner. In fact, strategic decision making, such as organizations, often occurs only when there is a crisis. A formalized structure is associated with reduced motivation and job satisfaction as well as a slower pace of decision making. The service industry is particularly susceptible to problems associated with high levels of formalization. Sometimes, employees who are listening to customers' problem may need to take action, but the answer may not be specified in many procedural guidelines or rule book. Next is centralization. What is centralization? It refers to the degree to which decision making is concentrated at the top of the organization. Centralized decision making often correlates with slow response time and reduced customer satisfaction. Centralization is the degree to which decision making authority is concentrated at higher levels in organization. There are two branches of management rules: centralized and decentralized. And centralized companies, many important decisions are made at higher levels of the hierarchy, which where are in decentralized companies, decisions are made and problems are solved at lower levels by employees who are closer to the problem in question. There are different strategic management processes. The top-down strategic planning takes place in high centralized organization. All important rights and power are in the hands of the top-level management, while the plan emerges is found in more decentralized organization. The assignment of authorities and responsibilities by the top-level management to the middle or lower-level management. Whether centralized or decentralized is more effective depends on the specific situation. And decentralized organizations such as W.L. Gore or Zappos, decisions are made and problems solved by empowered lower-level employees who are closer to the sources of issues. W.L. Gore and Associates in Formality and Innovation is the inventor of path-breaking new products such as breathable Gore-Tex fabrics, Glide, dental floss, and guitar strings. Bill Gore, a former longtime employee of chemical giant DuPont, founded the company with the vision to create an organization devoted to innovation, a company where imagination and initiative would flourish, where chronically curious engineers would be free to invent, invest, and succeed. When founding the company in 1958, Bill Gore articulated four core values that still guide the company it is associated to these days. W.L. Gore and Associates is organized in an informal and decentralized manner. People who work at Gore are called associates rather than employees, indicating professional expertise and status. Gore Associates organize themselves in project-based teams that are led by a sponsor, not a bosses. The four core values articulated by Bill Gore guide the company and its associates to this day. Often company founders define and shape an organization cultures, which can persist for many decades after their departure. This phenomenon is called founder imprinting. When founding W.L. Gore and Associates in 1958, Bill Gore articulated four core values that still guide the company and its associates these days. Planning takes place in highly centralized organizations, whereas plan emerges is found in more decentralized organizations. Some people think that centralization is better while only are in favor of decentralization. In ancient times, people used to run their organization in centralized manner, but now the scenario has been changed completely due to rise in the competition where quick decision making is required, and therefore many organizations of decentralization. At present, most of the organizations are equipped with both the features, as absolute centralization or decentralization is not possible. Complete centralization is not possible in an organization, not practicable because it represents that each and every single decision of the organization is taken by the top echelon. On the other hand, full-fledged decentralization is an indicator of no control over the activities of subordinate. So a balance between these two should be maintained.
The next one is hierarchy. Hierarchy means an element of organizational structure that determines the formal position, based reporting lines, and thus stipulates who reports to whom. Hierarchy contains a direct chain of command from the top of the organization to the bottom. Senior management makes all critical decisions, which are then passed down subsidiary levels of management. Hierarchy determines the formal position based reporting lines and thus stipulates who reports to whom. Let's assume two firms of roughly equal size, Firm A and Firm B. If many levels of hierarchy exist between the frontline employee and the CEO in Firm A, it has a tall structure. In contrast, if there are few levels of hierarchy in Firm B, it has a flat structure. The number of levels of hierarchy in turn determines the manager's span of control. How many employees directly report to a manager? Span control refers to the number of subordinates controlled directly by a superior. Also, it determines the level of interaction and responsibilities associated with employees and managers. In tall organization structures, Firm A, the span of control is narrow. In flat structures, Firm B, the span of control is wide, meaning one manager supervises many employees. In recent years, firms have delayered by reducing the headcount, often middle managers, making themselves flatter and more nimble. This, however, puts more pressure on the remaining managers who have to supervise and monitor more direct reports due to an increased span of control. Recent research suggests that managers are most effective at an intermediate point where the span of control is not too narrow.
Continuation of the topic. My name is Jaime Marcelo, reporting the mechanistic versus organic organization. First, organic organization. Organic organization is an organizational form characterized by a low degree of specialization and formalization, a flat organizational structure, and decentralized decision making. Several of the building blocks of organizational structure frequently show up together, creating distinct organizational forms: organic and mechanistic organizations. It means organic organization is more free or flexible when it comes to making a decision. Every part of a team or employee has an opportunity to create their own ideas to make their organization grow. This type of organization has an opportunity to be competent to other employees, but that's for their business or company benefits. For example, a Google corporation. Their employees are encouraged to use creative problem-solving skills and develop new products. The structure of an organization will dictate how people interact with each other and the relationship of roles in the organization. Next, mechanistic organization. Mechanistic organization is an organizational form characterized by a high degree of specialization and formalization and a tall hierarchy that relies on centralized decision makings. If the organization has opportunity to create their own ideas, mechanistic is a centralized decision making. It means their ideas or their strategy is come from the higher position, must be a leader or the owner of the company. Just for example, McDonald's has mechanistic structure because tasks performed in organization are highly repetitive at every local, just like their French fries. The temperature when you cook, the taste and the texture must be the same with their other branches. Next, output control. Seek to guide employee behavior by defining expected result, but leave the means to those results open to individuals, employees, groups, or SBUs. From the word output, it measures the performance. It seeks the level of performance. Or if it's functional, the manager are the one who decide the level of performance of an employee. If it's acceptable, because they will determine if they are functional and if the company is in a high performance. Next, firms. Firms frequently tie employee compensation and rewards to predetermined goals, such as a specific sales target or return on invested capital. Because in firms, here you can see the buy and sell products or services to consumer with the aim of making profit. Again, reporting, Marcelo Johaim.
And now let's talk about matching strategy and structure. The important and interdependent relationship between strategy and structure directly impacts a firm's performance. Moreover, the relationship is dynamic, changing over time in a predictable pattern as firms grow in size and complexity. Strategy and structure have a reciprocal relationship, highlighting the interconnectedness between strategy formulation, which we talk about later. Simple structure. A simple structure generally used by small firms with low organizational complexity. In such firms, the founder tends to make all the important strategic decisions and run the day-to-day operation. In general, the structure follows a selection the firm strategy. However, once in a place, structure has the potential to influence agreement, strategic action, as well as choices about future strategies. Regard, so this strengthen the relationship between strategy and structure. This choosing the firm strategy and structures should be committed to matching each strategy with a structure that provides the stability needed to use current competitive advantages as well as the flexibility required to develop future advantages. Functional structure. As a sale increase, firms generally adopt a functional structure which group employees into distinct functional areas based on domain enterprise. So we will talk about this later on. Next is, in the figure evolves from simple structure followed by functional structure and multivisional structure. This evolution is caused by sales growth and no coordination and control problems that prevent the firm from efficiently implementing its formulated strategy. A simple structure is an organizational form in which the owner or CEO makes all major activities directly and monitors our activities, and the firm staff and also has an supervision authority. The simple structure is characterized by low specialization of tasks, few rules, little information, and, and informal communication between the owner and CEO employees. At this evolution, structure from tend to move from simple structure to to functional structure. Now, the functional structure consists of chief executive officer and limited corporate staff with function lines like research development, engineering, manufacturing, marketing, sales, and service, human resource, and finance and accounting. These structures allow functional specialization, facilitate active knowledge with sharing each functional area. Knowledge share usually support career paths. Functional departments aggregate permit greater operational efficiency because employees with shared skills and knowledge are grouped together by functional perform. Each group of specialized can therefore operate independently with management acting as the point of cross communications between the functional areas. This arrangement allows for in-case specialization. But it has an advantage of this structure is that the different functional groups may not communicate with one another, potential decreasing flexibility and innovation. Functional structure may also be susceptible to tunnel vision, with each function perceiving the organizations only from within the frame of its own operation. Recent trends that aim to combat these disadvantages include the use of terms that cross traditional department lines and the promotion of cross-functional communication. Functional structures appear in variety of organizations across many industries. They may be most effective within large corporations that produce relatively homogeneous goods. Smaller companies that require more adaptability and creativity may feel confined by the communicative and creative functional structure tend to produce. Used with various business strategies, a functional structure is recommended when a firm has a fairly narrow focus in terms of product service offerings. Some refer to these functional areas as silos in titles that are vertical and disconnected from each other. Correspondingly, the company top management team typically consists of several functional heads such as the chief financial officer and the chief operating officer. Communication generally occurs within each functional department and it's transmitted across departments through the department's head. So, the multi-vision structure is composed of operative edges where each divisional each division represents a separate business to which the top corporate officer delegates responsibilities from day-to-day operation. The multivisional structure has three major benefits. First is it allowed corporate officer to actively monitor business unit permits, simplifying control problems. Second, facilitate compromises between division which improve the sources process. And last, it simulated managers of poorly performing divisions to look for ways to improve. The multi-visional structure is a type of organizational structure that groups each organizational function into a division. This division can correspond to either products or geographics. In the multi-divisional structure, the subsidiaries benefit from the use of the brand and capital of the parent company. Next is cost leadership strategy. The goal of cost leadership strategy is to create a competitive advantage by reducing the firm cost below that of competitors while offering acceptable value. The goal of a different strategy is to create a competitive advantage by offering products or services at a higher perceived value while controlling costs. Cost leadership requires the vigorous pursuit of cost minimization techniques. Costs may be reduced through improved operating efficiencies, production, learning, or scale economies, unique access to raw materials, or special relationship with suppliers, distributors, or customers. Cost leadership are often vertically integrated or integrated into high value added proprietary components and services. Although a little bit tricky, achieving cost leadership isn't a top deal. A unique and effective cost leadership strategy which is better than the competitors is the key. A cost leadership strategy works on a basic principle that more the number of units produced, lower will be unitary costs. It exploits the scale of production by producing highlighting standards products using advanced technology. In short, successful cost leadership strategy enables company to sell more units sold at a lower margin per unit. However, there are no shortcuts or escapes for a company aiming to achieve cost leadership in a long run. Either they have to commit cost reduction or they lose the race. Next is successful integration strategy. A successful integration strategy requires reconciliations of the trade-offs between differentiations and low cost. Integration strategy, also called management control strategy. Integration strategy allow a firm to gain control over distributors, suppliers, and or a competitors. So drawbacks. While certainly attractive, the functional strategy is not without significant drawbacks. A second critical drawback of the functional structure is that it cannot effectively addresses a higher level of diversification which often stem from further growth. A drawback is rebate on taxes paid by businesses on goods that were imported into the United States and then exported out again, such as raw materials being imported for use in production and the final goods then being exported. This lessens tax burden on companies, helping to improve their profitability. Next is the cost of a cost leadership strategy. The cost leader sell a no-frills standardized product or service to the mainstream customer. Moreover, the cost leadership needs to create incentives to foster processes innovation in order to drive down costs. As a business owner, You need to consider the various marketing strategies that will have the greatest impact on your revenues and profits. Cost leadership is one strategy where a company is the most effectively priced product on the market, meaning it is the cheapest. You see examples of cost leadership as a strategic marketing priority in many big corporations such as Walmart, McDonald's, and others. While it is difficult for many small businesses to compete with conglomerates on cost leadership, there are examples you find at a local level.
The next one is multidivisional structure. Multidivisional structure or M-forms structure means organizational structure that consists of several distinct strategic business units, each with its own profit and loss responsibility. Multidivisional structure aligns a company according to individual divisions which are based on geographic locations, product, or services. The advantages of multidivisional structure includes the ability to hold senior managers accountable for the results of local operations that are within their control. In addition, each division is alert to shifts in its market, which gives the division the ability to respond to these shifts quickly and remain competitive by refocusing their operating efforts to changing consumer preferences. The disadvantage of multidivisional structures includes the duplication of functions or even rivalry between divisions such as sales or manufacturing, which preludes the achievement of corporate level economies of scale and increases operating costs. This is the typical multidivisional structure. In this example, the company has four SBUs, each led by a CEO. Corporation may use SBUs to organize around different business and product lines or around different geographic regions. Each SBU represents a self-contained business with its own hierarchy and organizational structure. In Exhibit 11.7, SBU2 is organized using matrix structure. The CEO of each SBU must determine which organizational structure is most appropriate to implement the SBU business strategy. Multidivisional structure used with various corporate strategy to achieve an optimal match between strategy and structure. Different corporate strategies require different organizational structure. Firms that follow a single business or dominant business strategy at the corporate level gain at least 70% of their revenues from their primary activity. The corporate generally employ a functional structure. Managers using the M-Forms organizational structure to support a related diversification strategy should ideally concentrate decision making at the top of the organizational. This is the matching corporate strategy and structure. The first one of incorporate strategy is single business that matches in functional structure. The next one is dominant business that also matches in functional structure. The next one is related diversification that matches in cooperative multidivisional or M form, which has centralized decision making, high level of integration at corporate headquarters, competition among SBUs. The last one is unrelated diversification that matches in competitive multidivisional or M form, which has decentralized decision making, low level of integration at corporate headquarters, competition among SBUs for resources. The next one is matrix structure. Matrix structure means organizational structure that combines the functional structure with the M form. Matrix structures often used in project management because it speaks to both the product of the project and the function of the management producing it. One of the biggest pros of using a matrix structure is that it allows the sharing of highly skilled resources between the functional units and projects. Communication are open, which helps knowledge move throughout the organizational with less obstruction. The cons of matrix structure is there can be some confusion when a team member is subject to two managers that can create unnecessary conflict. A global a global matrix structure also allows the firm to feed local learning back to different SBUs and thus diffuse it throughout the organization. The matrix structure is quite versatile because managers can assign different groupings along the vertical and horizontal axes. The, ma- the matrix structure does have shortcomings. It is usually difficult to implement. Implementing two layers of organizational structure creates significant organizational complexity and increases administrative costs.
Good afternoon, I am Malapit Meritriz F, who will discuss organizational culture, values, norms, and artifacts. But first, what is organizational culture? Based on www.achievers.com, organization culture defines as a collection of values, expectations, and practices that guide and inform the action of all collection of traits that make your company what it is. Or meaning to say, this culture consists of shared beliefs and values that established by the leaders and then communicate and reinforce through various methods, ultimately shaping employees' perception, behavior, and understanding. Also, organizational culture is a second key building blocks when organization for competitive advantage. Now, let's describe the collectively shared values and norms of organization's member. First, values. It defines what is considered important or what is worth. These common values include outcome orientation, people orientation, team orientation, attention to detail, stability, innovation, and aggressiveness. Second, norms. It defines as appropriate employees' attitudes and behavior. Example of it, employees should respond to an email inquiry within a business day or to set auto response if they are on vacation. And now, let's proceed on how employees learn about an organization's culture through socialization. But first, let us define what is a strong culture is. It says here that a strong cultures emerge when the company's core values are widely shared among the firm's employee and when the norms have been internalized. Meaning to say, there is a strong cultures if the core values and norms have been effectively implemented and internalized among the firm's employee. Next is corporate culture finds its expression in artifacts. Meaning to say, an artifact is any memorable event or object that is created by the member of the company. Some of the company's artifacts are physical, like building architecture. Now let's proceed on where the organizational culture came from. First, founder imprinting. It is a process by which the founder defines and shapes an organization culture which can persist for decades after his or her departure. Meaning to say, it is the core concept describing how the past affect the present, and these social structures tend to become accepted practice, and therefore, it remains fairly unstable over time. Next is groupthink. It is a situation in which options coalesce around the leader without individuals critically evaluating and challenging that leader's option and assumption. Meaning to say, this is where the leader and members are discussing about the present alternative, critical position, or expressing unpopular opinion. This desire of the group cohesion effectively drives out good decision making and problem solving. Next is, how does organizational culture change? First is, it can be one of its strongest assets, but also its greatest liability. A good example on it is employee. It is the greatest asset as well as liability because employee are one of the helping hand to become successful, but also you have lots of responsibility for them like salary, training, benefits, and etc. Next is, an organization's culture can turn from a core competency into a core rigidity if a firm relies too long on a competency without hanging, refining, and updating as the firm and as the environmental change. Meaning to say, organization culture change to being less competitive due to the security on what position of the company it has. In fact, it is the time which the company being complacent for the success in present time, while the other competitors are being improved at the same time, or vice versa, unlike when the company is starting. Core rigidity. Core rigidity is a form of core competency that turned into liability because the firm has failed to hone, to refine, and update the competency as the environmental change. Next is organizational culture and competitive advantage. Can organizational culture be the basis of firms' sustainable competitive advantage? For this to occur, according to resource-based view of the firm, the resource in this case, organizational culture must be valuable, rare, difficult to imitate, and the firm must be organized to capture the value created, that is the Vireo principles. Meaning to say, organizational culture can be basis of the firm's competitive advantage if it is valuable, rare, and difficult to imitate, or Vireo principles. In addition with that, trademark and copyright should be protected, and if it is convert the organization core competency into its core rigidity. Now, let's proceed to strategic control and reward system. But first, what is strategic control and reward system? It says here that strategic control and reward systems are the third and final key building block when designing organizations for the competitive advantage. Also, the strategic control and reward system allows the manager to specify goals, measure the progress, and provide performance feedback. There are three additional control and reward systems, and these are organizational culture, input controls, and output controls. First is organizational culture. It can be a powerful motivator because having a strong organizational culture leads to better performance of employees and improve the performance of organizations in general. And also, it can be an effective control system. Norms, informal and tacit in nature, act as the social control mechanism. Second, input controls. Input controls seek to define and direct employees' behavior through a set of explicit, condefined rules and standard operation procedures. Meaning to say, Input controls is an asset or acquisition of resources and define qualities such as skills, abilities, values, and motivators. In fact, Gracia said input controls identify the difficult to measure resources input directed towards the end result attained through behaviors and performance. Also, firms use input controls when the goal is to define the ways and means to reach the strategic goal and to ensure the predictable outcome. Lastly, output controls. Output controls seek to guide the employee's behavior by identifying the expected results or outcome, but to leave the means to those results open to individual employees, groups, and SBUs. Meaning to say, it is focuses on the measurable results within the organization. In firms, frequently tie employees' compensation and rewards to predetermined goals such as a specific sale target or return on invested capital. Meaning to say, output controls invoke the measurable results within an organization. Example from the business world, it includes the number of hits of website received per day, the number of micro oven and assembly line produced per week, and the number of vehicle a car salesperson sell per a month.